Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the case of Jessie Blodgett. This case was suggested by one of you guys, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have. And of course, if you have any more, please do let me know. I haven't done a lot of them recently. Like, I've been looking into a lot more myself as well. But I hopefully will get around to them at some point. Jessie Blodgett was born in 1994 to her parents, Buck and Joy. This was in Atlanta in Georgia. And she would be their only child. You know, they wouldn't go on to have any more. It was just Jessie. Which meant that for a lot of people, she was extra special because she was their only baby. And they just loved her like so much, to the world and back. She basically was their world. They eventually went over and settled in Wisconsin. Jessie, as a person, she was highly intelligent. She always did really well in school. And she loved, like, arts, performing arts, singing, dancing. You know, she absolutely loved it all. She was also really into acting, and she was really good at all of it. Good little singer, good little actor. She also had a passion for animals and wanted to be like an animal activist who fights against animal cruelty. 19 was the age she sadly would get to. But just really intelligent, really caring, kind person who wanted to stand up for animals and wanted to change the world. Just such a lovely, lovely girl. And Jessie was pursuing her passions as well. You know, she played the piano. She loved playing that piano. She would play it all the time. Was very musically talented and gifted. And like I said, she was following the things that she wanted to do because she ended up getting a role on The Fiddler on the Roof. And she went and played in that part. And on the 14th of July in 2013 was opening night for Fiddler on the Roof. So they do this, they have a brilliant time, and Jessie goes to the after party. She has fun there. She gets back home early hours in the morning on the 15th now. And she goes into her mum. She tells her what a great time she's had, how well it all went. She even tells her about these two men that was flirting with her. And then she goes ahead and writes about it in her diary, saying that she can, like, fend for herself and things like that. So I don't know the extent of the vibe she got off of these men, but she felt the need to, like, write it down in her diary about it. Anyway, she goes to sleep then. Early hours, like I said. Next morning, her dad is the first one to leave the house, out for work. And Jessie didn't have anywhere to go that day. And Joy went in early hours. Well, I don't know what time it was, but not super duper early. She dropped off some laundry for her daughter. And Jessie was just asleep in bed. Like I said, she didn't have anywhere to go, so she just left her to it. She'd been out late, and so, you know, why not have a lie-in? She's a teenager after all, that's what they do as well. So she went to work for a few hours, and when she got home, she shouts around the house to see where Jessie is. So she's shouting her, she didn't get a response. Again, she just kind of thought that maybe she was still asleep at this point, and that she'd had an extra long lie-in. So when she doesn't get a response, she decides to go up to her room. When she was in the room, she still was not getting any sort of response from Jessie whatsoever. And when she approached her daughter and touched her, she felt that she was freezing cold. And so she rang for an ambulance immediately. Joy did roll her daughter over. I'm not sure whether that was before she rang for the ambulance or after. But she rolled her over and she found that she had ligature marks around her neck. Jessie had been strangled in her own home. And she was deceased. Police, of course, came. They launched an investigation immediately. They were jumping right on it. How on earth does something like this happen? And they did have to send off Jessie's body for an autopsy, obviously, to see what happened to her. And in the meantime, a couple of her friends had actually come round to the house to offer condolences, offer their support, you know. And one of those friends was a guy called Dan. Now, Dan Bartelt had been a friend of Jessie's for many, many years, actually. They actually dated at some point as well, years ago. You know, it wasn't recent, I don't believe. But they were pretty good friends for several years. And then as they're chatting away, talking about what possibly could have happened and, you know, about Jessie and things like that, Dan gets a phone call and he has to leave because of this phone call. Well, there's a strange story surrounding this phone call because it was the police on the other end. And they wanted to talk to him. Of course, you know, her mum, Jessie's mum, Joy, thought that it was just part of the investigation that the police would have wanted to speak to all of her friends to look into Jessie. But it wasn't, remarkably. It was actually a different police force investigating an attack on a different woman. It was in Richfield. This woman was walking through the park 3 days prior to Jessie's, sad murder, when she was suddenly attacked by a man. He was described as a white male, 18 to 20, about 6'2" and 210 pounds-ish. Now, this man is it's not a funny story, but it kind of is absurd, I guess. Basically, he attacked her with a knife, right? And I guess as he's holding this knife out, his victim actually manages to disarm him, get the knife off of him, and then she's got the knife, and she's like, the tables have turned. He tried to get it back, but he couldn't, and so he asks this girl if he can go. And she says, yes, but I'm keeping the knife, basically. So he does, he legs it. So of course, she called the police, they made a sketch up of the description she had. They also saw this van in the area too, a dark blue minivan Dodge Caravan thing. And an officer actually did, I think it was an officer, yeah, it must have been, recognise this car. So what he remembered was that he'd actually ran the plates a few weeks back for some reason or another, whether he was speeding or parking in the wrong area, I don't know. But this caravan or whatever had been ran before. So he goes back, he runs it, he looks into that, and he finds that it belongs to an elderly couple. So he goes and talks to them. And of course, from that, they find out that this middle-aged couple has a son. That son was Dan. And then they got the number and they then rang him with regards to this attack on this other lady in the park. Whilst he's literally at Jessie's house after having his friend having been found murdered. It's really, really weird. And it's not a coincidence. So anyway, Dan goes in, he speaks to this police officer and he asks like where he was and blah blah, just general chit chat. And he tells him that he was at Jessie's house. Now this officer had actually heard of the sad murder of Jessie, and he says to him, like, just in general conversation, oh, what do you think happened to her? And Dan just comes out with that she was assaulted, SA'd, and strangled. Well, it was pretty random to say something like that, like her literal body had just gone off for autopsy. Okay, they did know that she had been strangled, but that was it so far, so why was he saying that? It was just very weird. Police carry on questioning him with regards to this woman and this attack, and he denies it all. He also has a cut on his finger. He doesn't really tell them what that's from. It then comes out that he's been lying to his parents too about going to work every day when he was not going at all, because in fact he no longer had a job to go to. So he was under the false pretense of being there when he was just out doing other stuff, like attending parks and attacking women with knives. Eventually, he did confess to attacking the lady in the park, well, trying to attack the lady in the park, and he was arrested with regards to that. So, at this point, with the strange stuff that Dan had said with regards to Jessie, they are then wondering whether possibly he has something to do with it. He's now admitted to attacking a woman in a park with a knife. Well, trying to. So clearly he has some definite issues. And how did he instantly assume that Jessie had been raped and strangled? Like, where does that come from? He told him that he was at this park. Which park was it? I forgot. I'm going to look it up. Hang on. Woodlawn Park. He was at Woodlawn Park, and when they went to check the CCTV to check his alibi, well, guess what? He actually was at Woodland Park. So they're thinking, well, maybe he didn't have anything to do with Jessie's murder. However, when they go and check around the area that he was spotted and have a good little look around, well, guess what? They find something in a bin around that area. They find a cereal box, and within that cereal box is a ball gag, ligature rope that the marks on that line up with the marks on Jessie's neck from the strangulation, and some tape that matches the woman that was, I believe the tape was dropped in the park that they got from the attack on the woman, that also matched that too. But that wasn't in the cereal box. I don't believe that was actually in Dan's room. And they also found the tape roll under Jessie's bed later on. So, like, he'd used it all, and, you know, like the papery cardboardy bit, I guess, that was left over, they found that under a bed. When the autopsy results came back, they found Dan's DNA under her fingertips. They found his DNA on her. Both of their DNA was on the ropes. They found these alcohol wipes as well that he tried to use to clean up a bit, I guess. Not very well, though. Which, of course, is a good thing, because that's what we want. We want these... Well, we don't want these to happen in the first place, but, you know, they do, sadly. And we'd rather have, like, dumb criminals who don't know how to clean up after themselves and get caught for these horrendous, heinous acts that they do, rather than the ones that manage to get away with it. So, yeah. The police collect all the evidence, and Dan is charged with Jessie's murder, too. They also found that a snuff film was on his computer that exactly matched Jessie's murder, so he was living out some sort of sick fantasy that he'd watched or something. Who knows? He had a search history of, like, serial killers and just a whole host of gross things. Pretty dark stuff, basically. With everything that they had, you know, it was pretty cut and dry. They found him guilty of Jessie's murder. Even though he still proclaims his innocence. It's not really known why Dan did this to Jessie. Maybe that, you know, after this attack on the woman that failed, he was looking for another victim. He knew that Jessie would be easy and at home at the time. If they were friends, so he knew her, which is even worse. But basically that he was just an opportunist who figured that he could kill his friend and get away with it, I suppose. Luckily, he didn't get away with that. He probably would have carried on. Like, it seemed like he was escalating at the very least, so if he would have got away with doing that to Jessie, who knows whether he would have done it again. He probably would have done. So thank goodness he was off the streets, and he got justice for what he did to Jessie. Not that it ever brings her back. She was 19, she had a whole life ahead of her, she had these huge dreams, and she was just such a lovely person. And it's so heartbreaking to think that she was just... We don't know the circumstances. I don't know whether when a mum went in the morning, was she deceased then? Was she not? I'm not entirely sure. I guess not. And then maybe when a mum went to work and everyone was out of the house and she was still there in bed, maybe that's when he came in. Or maybe she wasn't still in bed and she opened the door to him knowing obviously he's a friend, so she let him in and then he strangled her. I don't know. I don't know what happened. Frankly, I don't think I want to. It's just really heartbreaking. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Jessie Blodgett. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.